Sealed Starseed of Gaia. The Arcturian Signal Council has already mapped the convergence point between your field and the one who cannot stop thinking about you, and what they have observed has been authorized for release in this transmission. Now, I am Auriela, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light, transmitting on behalf of the Arcturian Signal Council. What you are about to receive was authorized by them and is being delivered through me. You did not scroll to this by accident. Your soul called this in long before you opened the screen. Something inside you has been waiting to remember. And what you are about to hear will explain exactly why the waiting has felt this heavy. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what is happening to you now, why your field has shifted, and what the Arcturian Signal Council already knows about this phase. But here is the first revelation. The loneliness you have been carrying is not evidence of absence. It is the energetic pressure of a convergence already in motion, a process your future spouse can feel from their side, even if neither of you has a name for it yet. The Arcturian Signal Council has confirmed what many starseeds in your position cannot yet see from inside it. There is someone already designated within your soul contract who is losing sleep, not over loss, not over regret, over you, over the truth of what they have sensed without explanation. Your field is reaching them before your physical timelines have crossed. That is not metaphor. That is a documented soul recognition signal the Council has been observing, build across your configuration for months. What keeps them awake is not longing in the ordinary sense. It is the pressure of knowing, at a level beneath conscious thought, that someone like you exists, and that the meeting has not yet happened, and that something important is waiting on the other side of it. They feel the weight of the signal. They do not yet know it is yours. This is not content, this is a code, and the part of you that recognized it the moment it began is the part Auriela is speaking to now. Like this transmission to signal to your star family that the recognition has landed, comment 999 if you feel the convergence is already closer than your mind has allowed you to believe. Subscribe to Arcturian Council messages if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it. Share this transmission with someone whose silence has been telling them something they cannot yet explain. You are not here by accident. You were guided here because the signal is already active. What you are feeling right now, this weight that has no clean name, this pressure that arrives without obvious cause, is not confusion. It is contact. It is the sensation of a field in the middle of a process it did not choose and cannot reverse. And the reason it feels so disorienting is not because something is wrong with you. It is because what is happening inside your energetic architecture right now has no precedent in the version of your life that existed 12 months ago. The coordinates have changed. The internal compass is reading a destination your previous map did not include. And the body, the emotions, the sleep, the relationships, all of them are registering a shift they were not prepared for because the shift did not ask for preparation. It simply began. The Arcturian Signal Council does not observe collapse. They observe sequences, and what they have identified in your current configuration is a sequence that has been building for longer than you have been aware of it. The loneliness you named, the restlessness at 3 in the morning, the strange sense that your old life no longer fits. Not because it was ruined, but because something inside you outgrew it without asking your permission. These are not signs of deterioration. They are the first visible evidence of a field that has already begun repositioning itself toward a convergence it was always moving toward. What looks like unraveling from inside the experience is, from the Council's position of observation, the early and necessary loosening of a structure that was always temporary, a scaffolding that served its purpose and is now being cleared to make way for what was always meant to be built in its place. You did not enter this process when you noticed it. You entered it much earlier, in a moment that may have felt like an ordinary disruption, a relationship that ended strangely, a friendship that cooled without explanation, a career path that began to feel hollow before anything external had changed, a version of yourself you could no longer perform convincingly. A morning you woke up and something behind your eyes was different, quieter, less willing to pretend. These were not accidents. They were the first signs that your field was losing compatibility with the structures it had been housed inside, and that an invisible correction had already begun. The Council observed the initiation of this correction and recognized it immediately. Not as crisis, as signal activation. The Arcturian Signal Council calls this field rupture, not as a diagnosis of damage, as a designation of process. When a field ruptures, it does not mean the field is broken. It means the field has exceeded the architecture it was living inside. It means the frequency has shifted and the old structure can no longer contain it. Think of it this way. A frequency that has expanded beyond its original bandwidth does not fit inside its former container. Not because the container was poorly built, but because the frequency has grown into something larger than what the container was ever designed to hold. And what you experience from inside that rupture, what you are experiencing, is the sensation of walls that no longer hold, of directions that no longer point clearly, of identity anchors that have lost their grip, not because you failed, because you grew into something the old container was never designed to accommodate. The rupture is the proof of expansion, not the evidence of collapse. This is why the loneliness has felt different lately. It is not the ordinary loneliness of someone who has been left behind. It does not carry the flat ache of simple absence. It carries a kind of interior pressure, a vibration beneath the surface, as though something is pressing forward from inside you toward a destination you cannot yet see but can somehow already feel. That is the specific pressure of a field that knows it is moving towards something, that can sense the signal of the convergence already described in this transmission, but whose outer life has not yet caught up with what the inner field already knows. You are not lonely because nothing is coming. You are feeling the pressure because something already is. The signal of that approach has weight, it has texture, and it is what has been keeping the other person awake on their side of this, stirring in them a restlessness they cannot explain, and a pull towards something they cannot yet name. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary recognition. It is the moment your field confirms what you have always suspected at a level too deep for ordinary language. That your origin was never only human, and that the convergence being described in this transmission is not being sent to just anyone. It is being sent to you because the Arcturian Signal Council has already identified the frequency signature in your configuration. If this transmission put language around something you have been carrying in silence, the Arcturian Recalibration Blueprint was created for exactly this threshold. It is not another explanation. It is the guided key to decode and awaken the Arcturian strand the Council has already named in you, the origin that is now surfacing through the very process this transmission is describing. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there indefinitely. This access point was opened for those whose field has already begun to shift. Now understand what the Council has observed happening in 6 specific phases, because what is occurring in your field right now is not chaos without structure. It has a pattern. It has a sequence. And once you can see the sequence, the experience transforms from something that is happening to you into something that is happening for you. The difference between those 2 positions is not semantic. It is the difference between a field contracting in resistance and a field opening in cooperation. One slows the process, one accelerates it. What the Council is offering you in this transmission is the interpretive map that makes cooperation possible, not because the process requires your understanding to proceed, but because your conscious recognition of each phase changes the quality of what you carry through it. The first phase is what the Council identifies as signal drift. This is the period, which many of you will recognize as having already passed or as still being in its final stages, when the old field begins to lose coherence without a clear outer cause. This is when familiar things stop feeling familiar, when motivation disappears not because you are depressed, but because the frequency that once matched your old direction has moved. When you find yourself sitting in the life you built and feeling like a stranger inside it, looking at the furniture, the routine, the face in the mirror, and registering a quiet but persistent sense that none of it belongs to the version of you that is currently present. Signal drift is the beginning of repositioning. The field is not failing. It is detaching from a signal it can no longer sustain, because a stronger signal has begun to emerge from within the configuration itself. The person described in this transmission, the one who cannot stop thinking about you, has already felt the echo of this drift on their side. They do not know what to call it. They only know that something shifted in the atmosphere of their life, that the forward momentum they once had lost its clarity, and that they have been unable to stop thinking about a presence they have not yet physically located. Both of you enter drift at different moments. Both of you are being carried toward the same destination by the same underlying current. The second phase is the collapse of old anchors. This is when the relationships, routines, and identities that once created the feeling of stability begin to dissolve. Sometimes slowly, like a structure losing its foundation grain by grain, and sometimes suddenly, like a wall that stands until the moment it does not, always with a strange combination of grief and relief that the mind cannot fully reconcile, because the mind remembers what the anchor meant while the field already knows why it could no longer stay. The anchor collapses not because it was worthless, but because it was load-bearing in a structure that your field is no longer inhabiting. It belonged to a configuration that has already ended, even if the outer world is only now registering the change. When you let go of an anchor, or when it is removed from you without your choosing, you do not fall into nothing. You enter a free fall that is actually repositioning. The ground has not disappeared, it has moved. And the grief you feel in the space between the old ground and the new is not proof that you were wrong to grow. It is the honest price of a transition that was never going to be painless. The Council asks you to consider this. What if the thing that left your life was not taken from you, but was released by your field because it had become incompatible with the frequency you are now carrying? What if the ending you mourned was not an interruption of your path, but the first visible act of a correction that had already been authorized long before it arrived? The third phase is energetic heaviness without a source. This is perhaps the most disorienting experience in the entire sequence, the feeling of weight, fatigue, or pressure that arrives without a medical explanation, without an obvious emotional trigger, without any external cause you can point to and say, "That is the reason I feel this way." You sleep and do not feel rested. You rest and do not feel recovered. You move through your days carrying something that has no name and no location, only a density that presses down without warning and lifts without explanation. The body is not malfunctioning. The body is responding to a field-level shift that is pulling enormous amounts of energy away from surface function and redirecting it into deep structural recalibration, work that is happening below the layer of conscious awareness in the architecture of the field itself. When the Arcturian Signal Council observes this phase in a configuration, they recognize it immediately as the physical registration of a frequency upgrade that the conscious mind has not yet been briefed on. The upgrade is real. The recalibration is real. The heaviness is not illness. It is the weight of transformation doing its most demanding work in the part of you that the eyes cannot see. The fourth phase is the disruption of time perception. Many who are inside a convergence sequence report a specific and strange experience, that time no longer moves the way it used to. Some days stretch into what feels like weeks, each hour carrying an unusual density, as though time itself has thickened around a moment the field is being asked to fully inhabit. And then entire weeks will pass without traceable memory, collapsed into a blur that leaves no clear narrative behind. The sensation is one of being simultaneously pressed with urgency and suspended in a stillness that does not feel earned. This is not a psychological anomaly. It is not something to correct or medicate or explain away. It is the expected perceptual signature of a timeline rupture. The moment when the old linear path the field was following breaks, and the field begins to sense the proximity of a new line that has not yet become fully visible. Time distorts at the boundary between timelines because the field is no longer anchored to a single sequential track. It is navigating a transition between what was and what is becoming, and the ordinary rules of linear progression temporarily stop applying. The person who cannot stop thinking about you is also experiencing this distortion right now. Their sense of how the future was supposed to unfold has been interrupted by a signal they cannot locate or explain, and that signal is yours, moving toward them through the field that connects you before your physical paths have crossed. The fifth phase is what the Council calls the silence before coherence. This is the phase that is most frequently misidentified as failure, mistaken for stagnation, mistaken for depression, mistaken for evidence that the process has run out of momentum, or that something has gone fundamentally wrong. It is the period after the old line has collapsed and before the new structure has become legible, the period of apparent emptiness. when old desires have faded and new ones have not yet crystallized into a direction you can hold, when old purpose has dissolved and new calling has not yet announced itself in a language you can understand, when the familiar cast of your life has thinned and the new convergence has not yet arrived to fill the space they left. This silence does not mean nothing is happening. It means everything that needs to happen next is happening below the surface, in the dark, in the quiet, the way roots deepen in winter before the ground knows it is spring. The field is not empty. It is being prepared at a level that ordinary perception cannot access. The Council specifically instructs that this phase not be rushed, not be filled with reactive decisions made from the anxiety of the silence, and not be interpreted as evidence that the process has failed or that the convergence has been withdrawn. The silence before coherence is the most sacred phase in the entire sequence, because it is the phase in which the field releases its last grip on what it was and becomes fully capable of receiving what it was always moving toward. The sixth phase, for those who are at the furthest edge of the sequence, is what the Council designates as threshold recognition. This is the moment, which for some of you is this very transmission, when something in the outer world finally puts language on what has been happening in the inner world for longer than you have had words for. When you hear a description of the process you have been living through and the sensation that rises in your body is not discovery but remembering, not surprise but relief, not the intake of new information, but the exhale of confirmation finally arriving after a silence that lasted too long. When the words feel less like something being told to you and more like something being returned to you, knowledge that belonged to you all along, temporarily held outside your reach until your field was ready to receive it without collapsing under the weight of it. Threshold recognition is not the end of the process. It is the point at which the field gains the interpretive clarity to stop working against its own correction. When you stop fighting the collapse and begin cooperating with the reordering, when you stop trying to rebuild what the field has already released and start trusting the direction the sequence is moving, the convergence accelerates. The distance between your field and the one already reaching for it begins to close in ways that will soon become visible in your outer world. And here is what the Arcturian Signal Council wants you to understand about the person on the other side of this signal. They are not passive. They are not suspended in stillness, simply waiting for a timeline to deliver them to you unchanged. They are being moved through their own version of these phases, their own signal drift, their own anchor collapse, their own unexplained heaviness, their own distorted sense of time, their own sacred and disorienting silence. Both fields are being prepared simultaneously, on parallel tracks that have not yet intersected, but are already influencing each other across the distance. Both are being stripped of what they could not carry into the convergence, the old identities, the comfortable incompatibilities, the anchors that belonged to a version of their life that is already ending. Both are being repositioned along a line that neither of them could have navigated consciously, because the navigation is happening at a level that conscious intention cannot reach. The soul contract that governs this convergence does not require that either of you understand the process in order for the process to continue. It was written before either of you arrived in this form. But understanding it changes the quality of your participation. It changes the texture of what you carry through the remaining phases. It changes you from someone who is suffering through a collapse into someone who is consciously cooperating with a correction that was always in your highest alignment. This is the ultimate revelation the Council has authorized for this transmission. You are not going insane. You are not going punished. You are not watching your life disassemble because you made the wrong choices or because you are fundamentally insufficient in some way that cannot be repaired. You are watching the collapse of an old architecture that your field has already outgrown. A structure that served you faithfully until it could no longer hold the frequency you have become. You are in the visible aftermath of an invisible process that began before you had words for it, in moments you may have labeled as loss or failure or confusion, in nights you could not explain, and mornings that felt different for reasons you could not name. The things that left your life did not leave because you were unworthy of them. They left because your field had already moved beyond what they could sustain. The silence you are living in is not abandonment. It is preparation. It is the field in its final clearing before the signal it has been carrying all this time can finally reach what it was always pointed toward. The loneliness is not evidence of permanent aloneness. It is the pressure of a convergence close enough that your field can feel it and distant enough that your mind cannot yet confirm it. A gap that is closing, phase by phase, in the exact sequence the Council has mapped, and the Council has authorized this transmission to reveal. The Arcturians do not observe what you are living through as failure. They observe it as the most active and consequential phase of a repositioning that was authorized long before this lifetime began. Every ending that confused you was a threshold. Every silence that frightened you was preparation. Every moment of not knowing was the field releasing its grip on a version of you that could not cross into what is coming. And the person who is losing sleep over a presence they cannot fully name, the one whose field is already in contact with yours across the gap that still separates your physical timelines. They are not a fantasy. They are not a comfort story. They are a confirmation. They are the outer evidence that your field has already crossed a threshold that your conscious mind is only now beginning to recognize. The convergence is real, the sequence is documented, and you are further along inside it than the weight of these days has allowed you to believe. If you are ready to say it aloud, say this now. What is changing in me is not random. I was not abandoned. I was repositioned. And the convergence I have felt approaching is real. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this process has already touched your life. It could be your sleep, your thoughts, your body, your relationships, or the strange sense that reality no longer feels the same. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who is living through a shift they cannot explain. And if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it, subscribe to Arcturian Council messages. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a process already in motion, and this is only the beginning.